I've always said you don't choose Thailand. Thailand chooses you. And Thailand chose me. Thailand was like an invisible force that I gravitated towards, and I couldn't help it. It drew me in, and I gave my money, blood, sweat, and tears, and it spit me out the other side, a hollow version of myself and a broken man. I didn't think it was always going to be like that. I had dreams of seeing out my days in Thailand, and I still feel a connection to the country, even though I have no desire to ever return. Thailand, though, will always be somewhere where I think I belong. I really wish things didn't happen the way they did, but I can't go back in time and change things as much as I'd like to. Sometimes I am able to come to terms with it, yet sometimes I'm not. And I'll find myself in a daze, daydreaming about what could have been if only things had gone like I expected them to. Or even close to how I expected them to. But anytime you involve other people, anytime you trust other people, you're putting your own life in their hands, even though you're the one who has taken them to a level they could only dream of. I have listened to lots of stories now, and I love them. I like the way I can picture what's going on in the person's mind, and when it comes to my story, I don't really know how I want to tell it, because quite a few of the things that were important to me throughout my Thailand journey, in some cases, are a carbon copy of things that other people felt and did in Thailand. So I'll do my best to make my story my own. Because when I'm talking about my Thailand journey with people back at home, I'll tell it one way. Yet if I'm telling it to people who have already heard stories, I want to make sure that you get across what my point actually is. I would like to say that my Thailand journey began a very long time ago. I was at university in London, and I became close friends with a girl from Thailand who was studying there as well. She was from an extremely wealthy family, spoke just as good English as I did, and originally she was a very close friend of a girlfriend of mine. When that relationship I had came to an end, I still remained good friends with the girl from Thailand, although it was never an attraction kind of friendship. I was going through lots of girlfriends at the time. It was just an interest in the way she talked about her country, yet in the way it also made it feel similar to how I would describe my own country. For all intents and purposes, she could have been a girl from England, yet some of the things she did talk about Thailand really made me interested to learn more. This was in the early 1980s, by the way, and throughout university, she was always a friend of mine. I left and went one way, and throughout the next few years, we did talk from time to time and met up occasionally. I did that with quite a few of my friends when I was at university and when I left, and even today, my closest friend was from that time. But I'm trying to say that this wasn't just a special friend, it was one of many friends, and I did all these things because that was what it was, a friend. I'm just trying to get across how important that was. This wasn't a relationship. I guess I was around 27 and we were having a get-together, 6 friends from university, and we'd all got our jobs back in London, and then she announced to us she was actually getting married back in Thailand. She'd been working at a bank in the UK. Great job, made a lot of money, but she was moving back to Thailand because she was going to get married. She invited our friend group to the wedding, and I thought that sounded like a really amazing idea. So that's how I went to Thailand originally, just to go to a friend's wedding. I can't remember how old I was exactly, but it was 1989. That was my first introduction to Thailand, and while I was only a guest at her wedding, I was introduced to a side of Thailand that not many people saw. The level of wealth that her family had was obscene in comparison to what you saw out of the window of the taxi when you were going from the airport to your hotel. I mean absolutely obscene wealth. I didn't speak to anyone else in her family or anything like that, but they were just so incredibly wealthy. It made you wonder why they even bothered going to university and getting a job in the first place, because they had so much money, she didn't need to. I'm not saying I had anything wrong with how much money they had, but people who had money like that in England didn't seem to be able to be as loud or as brash about it. They didn't seem to be as out of reach when it came to doing things. It was clear that some people in Thailand were pretty dodgy, yet money talked. The way she described it was, if you've got a lot of money in Thailand, it's a lot better than having a lot of money in England, because you can just do what you want. But while I was only at the wedding, I went to the party afterwards. I was still there for a week, and I had my time available to meet up, taking a bit of the country in. I think it's worth pointing out my first time there because that wedding and being introduced to that part of Thailand, when I'm on my own time, I found myself going to famous places that people talk about. Khao San Road, Soy Cowboy, Pat Pong, all the typical places that Western tourists would go, even though they just want to check it out, just to say they've been. The two worlds seemed to be so out of place, yet they were so perfectly balanced for each other. Thailand needed both sides for it to make sense, and I just loved that I got the opportunity to see both sides of Thailand when I was there. Life just continued for me then. I got married myself a few years later, in 1991. I was 29 when I got married, and by this point I was starting to lose touch with my old university friend, and Thailand was the furthest thing from my mind. It was an interesting experience getting married. It felt it was just a natural step that you needed to take in life, but it also felt like you were saying goodbye to all the dreams you had before. Now it was time to do what was expected of you, as opposed to continuing to dream big. It lasted 10 years. We actually went to Thailand about 5 years into the marriage, to Phuket for a holiday. We had a child about a year after getting married, and then when he was 11, I was away on business. I returned home earlier than expected. I arrived home, opened the house door, and what greeted me was the shock of a lifetime. My wife was there, and so was this other man. She told me that he was the one she wanted to marry all along, but her family didn't approve. I was the safer choice because I had a more stable job and more money. So that was a particularly difficult time. Got divorced when I was 39 in 2001. Goodbye years of hard work and effort. Hello, regular child support payments, because even though she was the one that cheated on me, throughout the entirety of our marriage, my son stayed with her. He was only 11 as well, and that was a long slog of life ahead of me, completely out of my control as well. And it's a warning to anyone, I suppose, not to put yourself in a position where you're going to be paying for someone and benefiting someone else, even though they're the one that hurt you. It's so difficult to picture now because it was an awful time of my life, but I had to get on with it and there's nothing I could have done. I had some good news about 3 years later. My ex, much to the disappointment of her family, got heavily involved with that man who was in my house when I returned early from that business trip. He was into drugs and all kinds of things, and she got caught up in that world. So 3 years later, I actually won custody of my son, and that was a very rare thing. But it was clear that I worked hard, made good money, and was stable, and she was just the exact opposite of that. So I guess that takes us to 2005. My son's 14 and he's living with me. And I'm not even thinking about getting into another relationship anytime soon because my son is the most important thing. What I am thinking is that when my son goes to university himself, I'd made enough money to be able to pay for that for him. I wanted to do something very different for myself though. I didn't want to get into another relationship at home, and I was actually thinking about leaving England and doing something different altogether. I'd saved up some money over the years, and I was in a position to go and try something new and exciting. I didn't know what that was going to be, but it just needed to be something. It could have been going to Thailand, for example, or it could have also meant going on a cruise for a year. My mind was racing with ideas about how I wanted some time to myself after the ups and downs of my life. 2009 was when my son turned 18 and he got into a great university. He leaves home, about to take on the world for himself, his own experiences and troubles to shape his life, just like is said for everyone else. I'm very proud of how he's turned out. I need to throw that in there. A great job, great money, great house, great family, everything you could want, so I was thankful that he managed to achieve that. But in 2009, that's when it felt like a weight had been lifted from my shoulder. It wasn't a weight that I disliked or didn't want to be there because I loved my son. I loved him so much that I was prepared to put in extra hours at work, prepared to work hard, seek promotion where possible, but now I didn't need to do that anymore. I was able to take a step back and start thinking about doing something fun for a change. I guess I probably had my house still and still owed a lot of money on it, but I also guess I had about £250,000 in cash through years of work, and I started thinking about what I was going to do. The idea is I had arranged so dramatically, like I'd said, it's quite difficult to determine what the best thing to actually do was. There's so many things you can do. Part of me was thinking, why don't I move to the south of France or Spain and buy a little apartment there? And then from there, think about what to do. I actually decided I was going to go to Thailand again. That would be my third time there, and that stretched over the course of many decades. I'd have been there in the 80s, the early 2000s, and now 2009. So it just seemed like it was the perfect place for me to go to take stock of my life and decide where I wanted to take things next. What I didn't want to do was continue working in a job like I'd have ever since I left university. Although I was paid well, it wasn't about the money. It was about the monotony of it, the day after day sameness that wears you down over time. Thailand was where I decided to go, and Thailand is where I flew at the end of 2009, with no plans, no ideas where this would lead to, but I was open to everything that came my way. I was open to living life, but the possibility of returning to England was always there. I never hated England. I mean, I love being from England, and I love living there, so Thailand was never meant to be an escape from England. It was just meant to be a brief interval where I thought about things to do. But what it became was so much more than that. Thailand became my life, my world even, and Thailand would cause me some kind of downfall. I think it's only right to say, though, that Thailand itself didn't cause my downfall. My decisions were my decisions alone, coupled together with something that happened to me in Thailand to cause it anyway. Thailand is an amazing country, and I still do love it. And it's not me trying to say anything bad about the country itself, because it's great. I don't know how anyone else feels when they get to that age where all the commitments that they've had throughout their life are no longer commitments. I was a free agent, able to do anything I wanted, and I think it was that newfound freedom that attracted me so much to Thailand. It also got me a bit carried away, I suppose, doing things that I never would have done before going there. It's not like I'm trying to make up for lost time, because I didn't think my time was lost up until then. My son was my life up until he left for university, and I enjoyed every single day that went along with that. But what I did during that time wouldn't have been my first choice of things to do before it happened. I wouldn't have decided to go down the path that I did, but it just happened, and you're happy and you let it happen like that. So, I don't know what I'm trying to say here, really. Getting there in 2009, single, money in the bank, someone living in my house paying me rent, which is just about covering the mortgage. Now it's time to live a little. Unfortunately, I did some silly things, but I'm not going to say no one does. Everyone does silly things. And I did enjoy the nightlife, because I had all the intention in the world to enjoy the nightlife. But I didn't expect it to be like it was for me. I entered the country on a visa exempt, 30-day stamp in my passport. And where those first 30 days went, I can't even say. Bangkok was like a playground for someone like me. It was like the place where you went to let off years of pressure that had built up over your life. You could completely unwind. And those 30 days, or what I can remember of them, the little bits here and there, they were some of the best times of my life. Only if you're talking about things related to myself and not my son, of course, because seeing him and where he is today is far better. But that's related to him. I'm talking about just myself. I don't want to mix up the two and make you think me spending 30 days in the bars of Bangkok is better than something so much more important. I'm just trying to paint the most accurate picture I can. I do remember getting that 30 days extended for another 15 days, and after that I had to leave the country before I could return. I think that 15 days I calmed down a lot. I took stock of things, and I decided that I wanted to spend more time in Thailand. It only seemed to make sense that I got a better visa to stay in the country, and I was in my 50s, so I could get a retirement visa. I went to a different country to do that and extended it in Thailand. I think I could have actually got it in Thailand, but I'm not really sure. But it did give me time to go and spend a bit of time in Cambodia, where I went to get the visa. I'm not sure if you can get them there today or not, and apparently getting it in Laos would have been easier. But I was interested to check out what Phnom Penh was like. When I was there, I can remember it feeling quite similar. This is in 2009 or 2010 early on, I can't remember. But it felt like how Thailand felt when I was there a long time ago. I've heard other people describe it and try to make comparisons, and while it did feel like that, you got similar feelings, Cambodia is definitely its own unique place with its own unique history. I enjoyed my time there, and I had been a few more times throughout the years of being in Thailand. But now I had my visa, I went back to Thailand, in Bangkok, and I was in a position where I could extend the visa because I'd already deposited the money in the bank in order to get it. Back in Thailand, I decided to calm down a bit. Still enjoy things in the nightlife, and that's okay, but don't enjoy it so much that you can hardly remember it. That was when I went to learn more about the country by going to different cities that I'd heard people rave about, yet I'd never been to myself. I really fell in love with Chiang Rai, right up in the north. That would become one of my favourite places in the whole country, but the reason that I didn't live there was because it was so isolated where it was. There is the airport there and you can fly to Bangkok, of course you can, but it always felt like you were one extra step away from going somewhere else. Bangkok was a city I really loved, but it didn't feel like somewhere I wanted to spend more time or live. And at this point, I'm still not thinking I'm going to be living in Thailand permanently. I'm just going to be taking things as they came. A retirement visa because it was the easiest one, not necessarily because I was planning on retirement. I didn't know yet. I guess it's quite a common move to say that. I did find myself renting a place in Pattaya, initially on a 6-month lease. It wasn't like Pattaya was my favourite place in Thailand, far from it. It was just so convenient to get to Bangkok. It was so convenient to go a little bit further down south to Koh Samet and Koh Chang, and it was where it was located in the country, as well as all the Western conveniences that attracted me to the city. The nightlife did have a big draw as well, but the nightlife wasn't there. I would have still chosen it as being the place to live because of its convenience. I was tempted by Hua Hin, although I chose Pattaya. I'd say we're roughly 2010 at the moment. I can't remember which month, and I have got enough money that could last me a very long time. And I'm looking all the time for different things to do in terms of making a bit of extra money online. It was a lot less common back then, but the jobs that I did and the things I did, I don't really need to say what they were, that's not important. I was able to find things quite early on and just do little bits of projects online and make some extra money. It was mainly just to keep myself occupied, and throughout the whole of 2010, while still enjoying the nightlife 2 or 3 times a week, I was doing projects for people in my speciality, and if anything, that was enough for me to live on. So at that time, I wasn't even using my savings. 2011 was when things changed for me, because a close friend of mine who was living in Pattaya was going to be getting married to a girl he met from Surin. He invited me to go with him, and I relished the opportunity to go and see what a village wedding in Thailand was going to be like. He'd met her in one of the bars, and he'd already been up to visit the family quite a few times, and said it was really great up there. He said it might be right up my street, and he knew I was interested in experiencing different parts of the country, and I was excited to go and see what it was all about. I can remember the drive to get there. I didn't have a car, but my friend did, and his wife had gone up on the bus a week before, so it was just me and him, and we were going to be stopping off for a few days at different cities along the way. He called it his bachelor party, although it was only me and him. First stop was Korat, probably going to see it on the map as Nakhon Ratchasima. That was my first introduction to Isan, and it was the exact opposite of everything I expected it to be. When you hear people talking about Isan, and that's where most of the girls are from that work in the bars, you picture it very differently than it actually is, especially the cities, and it was a really great city, and I could have seen myself spending more time. We did a night after that in Buriram, and that's another amazing place in Thailand. I think Thailand has worked itself up maintaining Bangkok as the be-all and end-all of the country, yet there are so many other places that are equally as fantastic. And what I'm trying to say is that I could have seen myself living in either of those cities, and I like them. As much as I liked Pattaya, mainly just for the Western conveniences, I could get what I needed most of the time from these cities as well. It didn't feel like it would have been much of a sacrifice to have lived in either of them. When we got to Surin, his fiancée came to meet us where we spent a night in the city, and after that drove to her village. That's when Thailand takes a turn, almost as if you feel like you're driving back in time. That's the way I've always described it to people. You can be in a modern city with great infrastructure, great roads, malls and shopping centres, and the further you drive away, it does feel like you're going back in time to how things used to be. While the roads are still equally as good, equally as modern, and by this time in 2011, the electric infrastructure in the village and things like that were very good, it was just the way that things felt different. It was like they were living decades in the past, yet with modern conveniences around you, and that's how I felt village life was when we finally got there. This was the day before the wedding, and just on the outskirts of the village was a hotel. It wasn't like a hotel you'd expect it to be, it was just some guy who had built some small buildings on his land that he rented out at $400 a day. Those didn't have air conditioning, but there's nothing more than a few beers at night before a wedding that can't help you to sleep. The reason I'm saying this is because I felt a draw to that part of Thailand because it was different, worlds different to everything I knew before. Combining different worlds all in one, what do I actually mean by that? Modern infrastructure, 7-Eleven close by, 20 minutes into town, where you've got big shops where you can buy lots of things that you need. And okay, you're not going to be able to get some things that you can get in Bangkok or Pattaya, but there is still a big selection. You've also got this laid-back and peaceful environment, surrounded by rice fields and temples everywhere. It's like living in the model world in the past, and I just loved it. I really loved it. The wedding was an interesting experience. I think they had the whole village there. My friend was just going through all the motions expected of him, and he had such an open mind that even things to certain Western people and how difficult it would have been for them, for him, he was just loving it, and it lasted the whole day. The thing that I remember the most was the really beautiful Thai women, I guess in their early 20s, who were singing and dancing on a stage that had been hired out for the event. It didn't seem like it was the type of thing you'd expect at a wedding, but you could tell how excited the older guys in the village were because they seemed to be getting really into it. Most of them were completely hammered by 2 p.m, and they were still dancing at 11 p.m, and they just welcome you into the village and their culture with open arms. They make you feel so welcome, and the people are some of the kindest and nicest you'll ever see. It does make you feel, though, after things happen to you, is this just a surface level thing, or does it run deep? It's difficult to know, really, but after his wedding, I left down to Bangkok myself because he had to spend a few more days there. He was going off to Malaysia with his wife. Unfortunately, his marriage only lasted 3 years. He lost a load of money, but he didn't build a house, so I guess that's his only salvation. He's been married 2 more times since then. The last marriage seems to be going okay, but he has so much money that he could afford to keep losing it all the time, and it wouldn't affect his life. Back down in Bangkok, I spent a few days there, and all I could think about was that part of Thailand I'd just left and how much I loved it. Returning to Pattaya a few days later, back to my place, I did start getting back into life, but I was always thinking about how great it would be to live somewhere like that. I had a few girlfriends since being in Thailand, but I met someone that I thought could be more than just a girlfriend. I don't mind saying that yes, I met her in a bar, and she was actually from Korat, the first place I stopped off on the way to my friend's wedding. I talked about how I was there and how much I liked it, and she said that she liked it as well. Her village was only half an hour from the city, but she'd been there lots of times, and she was just in Pattaya because it was easier for her to make money there. She was in her mid-30s, so she wasn't as young as some girls were, and I wasn't one of these guys who was interested in someone younger than my son. Mid-30s for her, 50s for me, seemed like it was acceptable and wouldn't cause any friction if we decided to take things further. She did have 2 children from a relationship she had back in the village a long time ago, and she'd been working in Pattaya in the bars for 12 years. But the fact she was prepared to tell me the truth about things, as opposed to try to hide it like lots of the other girls seemed to do, I thought that was her being open and honest about who she really was. She'd worked in a few bars over the course of 12 years, and she said she nearly got married to someone about 6 years before. He was from Austria, and he even went back to where she was from. He promised they would get married. He returned home, and she never heard from him again. She said she spent about a whole year with him, and I could tell by the way she spoke to me how it was her dream just to be able to stop working in the bar and have a husband. At least that's the way I read it. I never wanted to judge people for what they did in the past. I don't think anyone can judge anyone because everyone has done things that they're not proud of or that they didn't want to do if they had their time again. So the fact that she did that for 12 years, I didn't care. We moved quite quickly in the relationship. It just felt like we were meant for each other. At least in the early days it did. And after 3 months, I'm already up in the village meeting the family. Her village was very similar to the one I went to with my friend when he got married. And again, I felt a really strong draw and connection to the place. I could see myself living there, and at this point I'd already decided I didn't want to leave Thailand, and I'd cut my spending back because I didn't want to run out of money. It was never my plan to stay in Thailand, and it just became where I stayed. I thought I would get bored and want to return home and do more work. But I'm finding I'm making little bits of money online when I'm doing projects for people. And although I've spent quite a lot of money out of my savings since I've been in Thailand, I still had most of it left. And my mortgage is still being paid off at home, so things seem to be progressing well for me. We're visiting the family, I'm even introduced to her children, and I could tell that she was at that point in her life where she'd had enough of working in the bar. I mean, who could blame her? She'd been doing it for a long time, and I admired her in one way because she was able to provide for her children, who were being looked after by her parents. And she was able to look after her parents at the same time, so they didn't need to go and work in the fields like many people in the village did. Her mum was well taken care of. You might have heard it from time to time, but she was one of those people, those Thai ladies from Isan, who liked to chew betel nut, and her mouth was the colour of it, bright red, and she was also covered in gold that her daughter had bought for her over the years. It was a sight to behold. If you have thought about Thailand and have been there, and have had any experience with things, they actually measure the weight of gold differently than they do in most other countries. While in Thailand they have the Thai baht as the currency, gold is also measured in baht, as in baht weight, and if I'm not mistaken, I think it's about 15 grams, give or take, for 1 baht of gold. 2 baht of gold is just under an ounce, and in Thailand the gold is 96.5% pure. Anyway, what I'm trying to say is that she probably had 20 baht of gold adorned all over her, and it was, like I said, a sight to behold. At this point, we're not actually living together yet. She was still working in the bar, and it was a bit difficult, because although I considered we were in a loving relationship, she was still working there. But after going and visiting the family and just seeing how amazing it was there, like I had with my friend, that's when I said, okay, I think we can take this to the next level and we can move in together. The look on her face when I said that was like that's what she'd been waiting for a long time, and she didn't hesitate when I asked her to move to my place. She was actually sleeping in a room above where the bar was. It was one of those shop houses, and that's where she slept with 3 other girls that worked there. And there's something I want to say, but I don't think I will, in terms of that room situation. So she's living with me, and I feel like we're developing a great connection. I think we're both at an age where we're not too far apart to make this work, yet she's not too old where she doesn't want to have a good time anymore. And after 3 months of us living together, that was when I thought, well, it's now or never. I had stopped doing projects online because I'm just living in the moment with my girlfriend, and we went to different places in Thailand, and then that was when I asked her to marry me because it just felt right. We were a great match, and I was very interested to spend my life with her. I remember telling my son I was getting married, and by this point he'd already finished university and got himself a good job, and he flew out to experience his dad getting married in a Thai village. He's a very open-minded lad, my son is, and he loved it, the whole experience. He had a few girlfriends on his Thailand trip, but Thailand didn't grab hold of him like it did many people, and he actually couldn't wait to leave back home to work. But now I'm married, and I'm thinking that Thailand is going to be my forever country. I hadn't made any plans about what I was going to do yet and things of that nature, but that was of the age where it felt like I really didn't need to work if I was in Thailand. The house that I had back in the UK, the mortgage would have been paid off in around 8 years' time, and I can't remember exactly if it was 8 or 7 or whatever it was, but once that was paid off, the rent from that would give me enough income to live in Thailand. It would have given me around 2,000 a month. It was in London, and I bought it a long time ago when prices just continued to go insane in London. Throughout time, the prices have gone mad, but if you were lucky like I was and got it at a time when it wasn't as crazy, then you were just that, lucky. I've got a good friend of mine who lives on the same street as where I had the house, and he thought he was so clever because he made a lot of money on houses. And while you've got to be in it to win it, it was still a gamble that might not have paid off if prices hadn't gone as crazy as they did. I just think that I was lucky in that sense, so 8 or 9 years, my house would be paid off, and then I'd have an income, so that's why I decided that with the money I had, I could use it to build my life in Thailand. This is when we went back to the village again. This is when we went to start thinking that this is where we wanted to live, and this is where we decided we wanted to live. So the next step from there was to build somewhere. I can't really remember how much money I had left out of my savings. It was quite difficult because I had some in England, some in Thailand, and there was a bit in Singapore when I opened an account there because it felt like it was a good idea. Ballpark figure, I would say it was around £180,000 that I had in total. One thing I loved about her village as well was that it was in Korat, which was only about a 5-hour drive from Pattaya and even less to Bangkok. I think it's about 3.5 hours to Bangkok from where the village was, and that really made a big difference for me. When I spoke to other people who were living in Isan who spent time in Pattaya, some of them lived 12 hours away, some of them even a little bit longer than that. But I loved the fact that we were so close to places like that. I bought a car, the first time owning a car in Thailand. I bought a bike, and this was after our house had already been built. I spent about £70,000 on the house and a little bit extra on the land, and although it belonged to my wife and I had no legal claim to it, we were married, serious and in love. And when we moved into the house, everything really did feel like it was coming together so well. I was probably about 7 years away, if I'm thinking with my head screwed on, from paying off the mortgage of my house. So 7 years I've got to make about £80,000 last. There was of course the risk of a tenant moving out or problems with the house, and as is usually the case, the tenant did move out, and it was vacant for 6 months, which meant I had to spend £12,000 out of my savings just to pay the mortgage, which was still okay. I also needed to do a bit of renovation work when the house was empty, and that was another £10,000. So 22,000 of that, the 80,000, meant that I had to make what was left stretch even further. I did find a new tenant though, and they paid a little bit more, and I was just throwing all of the money to the mortgage, waiting for the time when it could be paid off. There was no internet in the village at the time, so I couldn't really do any projects online, but it was seemingly going to be okay. Until it wasn't going to be okay. Quite a few things happened after moving into the house in the village. Some of them to start with I could have written off as innocent mistakes, while other things I can't say anything other than they were shocking revelations that I never thought for a second were possible. I don't know which order I should describe them in really, because I don't know which ones came first and which ones came after. There were so many things going on. But I think it's worthwhile saying that after I had to pay the money, while waiting for the new tenant and for the renovation, the idea of spending what was left didn't feel like it was that much money. I was okay with things though and thinking like this is going to be okay, but I wasn't 100% sure. I really loved the village, but there were things I didn't like. Dogs that chased after you, and I was bitten once as well, but I thought the positives far outweighed the negatives. And when my wife approached me saying that there was some land for sale adjacent to the main road, which you turned off to get to the village, how it was a great price and we could open a shop there, which would give us more money while we were waiting for this to happen, instead of thinking it was a bad idea, I paid very close attention to it as being a potentially great idea. It was for sale urgently because the people needed the money, and because it was in such a great spot on the main road, it could be a good investment for the future as well. If you know anything about Thailand, you will know that having land on a big main road is important for people because they can have a business there. And also, you might see a luxury house right next to a busy main road and wonder, if they've got that much money, why build such a great house next to a busy road? Why not in a peaceful setting? But once you know Thailand enough, you understand that building it there is so that people can see it, even if it means it's extremely noisy. So having this land, I thought, would be a good investment anyway. It would take about 30% of my money to buy it, and then maybe 20% more to get the shop opened. How it was going to work was we'd build a shop, very cheap structure, and we were going to sell frozen meat and other foods that we could buy in bulk at Macro and portion out into smaller portions and then sell them in the shop. It made perfect sense to me, and it did seem like it would be a fun thing to do as well, while waiting instead of just sitting around waiting. So I bought it in my wife's name, and the shop was built as expected, and the shop was running, and it was bringing in money. Not quite as much as expected, but it was still bringing in money every month, and because we'd done that, the whole project from start to finish had taken a year. That was a year of things moving forwards to the eventual goal. But in terms of money, it was a struggle. It was a struggle to get to where we needed to be, and I was just hoping that the time would get there eventually. Around the same time, you'll hear about someone in the family who was having financial difficulties. They borrowed money from a number of different loan sharks in the area, and the interest was piling up every single day. Guys going around to the house demanding money, threatening, looking like they were going to do things, and when it's a family member, you sort of think, well, maybe I should help. When they approached me and say, could I borrow, or could they borrow, 500,000 baht and we'll pay it back? I don't know why I said yes. Perhaps because I wanted to help them. But I did give them 500,000 baht, which that meant now I was more reliant on the shop working. The shop started bringing more money in, just a little bit more than before, and although I don't have much money left, we're just scraping by, making enough money to live. I'm not really concerned though about that because I know eventually there is something there. I was expecting to be paid back slowly over time from the money I lent as well, and because I wasn't charging any interest, it felt fair. But they didn't even give me one payment back. When I asked my wife why they'd done it like that, she just said it was normal. She just said they'll pay it back eventually. But they didn't. That was a big loss right there. I'm still okay in Thailand and reasonably happy. The shop that my wife is doing, she's happy with that, and she's working there, and she's sharing the money that it's bringing in with me on the one hand, so that's okay. But money is running tight, and there is still about 5 years to go until I'm going to get any income, because the rent I'm getting from my house is just paying the mortgage. My wife comes to me with another business idea, and because the shop was working, I was very open to listening to what this idea was. I think that's what it was mainly. The fact that this shop had opened and she was making money and she was always there and busy, and this new idea sounded like it was all she said. It sounded like it would bring us in more income, and it would be passive as well, which could add an even better income than we would get eventually. The idea was to buy some land that was quite close to the place where we had the shop, and there were always new businesses popping up around the area. It was a very up-and-coming place, and we could buy it and build 3 small shop houses next to each other on the land, and she said rent each of them for $12,000 a month. I spent a lot of time looking at other businesses in the area, and they all seemed to be doing okay, and I guesstimated how much they were making, and it seemed like it would be great. Also, it would mean we weren't reliant on just one source of income in the future. We'd have my house income, but we'd also have the income from these shop houses, which could be a really good thing. What it meant, though, was I would need to remortgage my place back in the UK. I had a lot of equity in it, and I'd need to pull out about 30% of the equity in order to achieve this. On the one hand, it would mean it's going to take a lot longer to pay it off, or the payments would increase. Yet on the other hand, it would also mean that this business should be able to pay off the extra and just give us a little bit on top, which I thought was a good idea. I need to say that I didn't just run into it straight away as if it was going to be the easiest thing in the world. I seriously thought about it for a number of months, and one day I just decided that I wanted to go for it. It would mean remortgaging the house, as I said, and I wasn't even sure it would be approved. But I'd been paying off my mortgage every single month without fail ever since I got the house, and I had income going into my bank from the work I did, although I hadn't done that in a while. I applied and I was able to show that while I did have an income from the house and the other bits of work I did, and because of that it was approved, and I took £100,000 out. It meant, though, that the length of time was actually going to be the same, but instead of the payment being one thing, it was going to be quite a lot more. The idea was, though, that the income from the shop houses should cover the remainder of the extra payment, and then, during the same amount of time frame as we would have otherwise had, we should get to the point where not only do we have the income from my house in the UK, which will be paid off, we'd have the income from the 3 shop houses, which would also be fully paid off. It seemed to make perfect sense because when you did the maths and you worked it out based on the figures that she gave me, and based on what I thought was a reasonable amount of money, it didn't feel like it was a type of risk that many people think it is. I didn't even think it was a risk. I mean, there were risks there, risks in everything, but I thought it was a calculated risk. It would obviously be very good if it worked, giving us an extra 36,000 baht a month on top of the £2,000 a month income. So what would that be? Around 120 to 130,000 baht a month at the time, depending on the exchange rate. And that would make a big difference to our income in the future and make retirement even better. That was why I agreed to do it, because the figures made it appear that although we'd still be waiting a long time, like I said, around 5 years, I can't remember exactly until everything was paid off. When it was paid off, we'd be better off. And it would be a difficult 5 years in the meantime, but after that it would all be worth it. I didn't feel like it was some harebrained scheme. I didn't think it was just a shot in the dark sort of idea. I thought it was a really good idea, and I couldn't wait to try to do it. But getting that remortgaged, the money landed in my bank, transferred it to Thailand, and we put an offer in on that land. It was priced quite high, but it was for sale for a while, so we got it for 20% less than they wanted, so I thought that was good and I was pleased with it. Then the shop houses were ready very quickly. They weren't these big 3 or 4 ones that you see in places like Bangkok, just 2 stories, a room downstairs with a bathroom at the back, and upstairs 2 small bedrooms and a bathroom. It would be perfect for someone who wanted to run a business from each of them, and they could do all kinds of things. Enough room to have a restaurant if they wanted one of those, any kind of business that would fit into it, and the rent, she thought, would be around 12,000 baht a month each. It seemed to be plausible. Going into it, I was really excited. It was a new project to stick my teeth into, and I could tell my wife was really happy as well. When we had the land, we found a builder to do the work for us, and it didn't take long. All in, the cost was around £90,000, so there was a £10,000 buffer there, which I thought was a good thing to have. When they were built, it was really exciting. We had these 3 shop houses, and we had our shop, which we could see from them. It was on good land that I thought would only go up in value in the future. And we bought some rent signs outside, and immediately someone came and said they wanted to rent the one on the right-hand side. The same day they wanted it, and they agreed to the 12,000 baht a month price just like my wife said, and they moved in that same day. I couldn't believe it was that quick. It was just a guy who seemed to be from the local area. I didn't pick up on anything at all. I need to say that. But he moved his stuff in, and a few weeks later, he's got his business there. He's selling motorcycles and doing motorcycle repairs. Everything did take a turn for the worse from there, though. For a start, we were struggling to find people to come and rent the other ones. And when people did come for a look and we told them the price, they looked like that's way more than expected. They were expecting it to be 3,000 or 4,000 baht range, and even that they thought was expensive. Quite a few people said the same thing, so I'm not sure why this guy just gladly took it at 12,000 baht and moved in straight away. At this point, he's been in for a month, and we've had people looking at the others, but without much luck, and it's time for him to pay. Then he doesn't pay. My wife goes around to see him and comes back a few hours later saying, "Well, don't worry, he'll pay soon." So I didn't worry. Then more time goes by, another few weeks, and he doesn't pay again, and we're not getting anyone to look at the other ones. My wife goes around again and says, "He's going to pay, don't worry." And I was starting to worry though, because what she said was going to happen didn't happen. We should have had them all rented out. We found that person immediately, yet he's not paying, so I didn't know what was going on. After that guy had been there for 2 months and he still hadn't paid, and my wife's going all the time to try and make sure he has, I'm spending time at home by myself just worrying because the finances are quite tight. She's spending a lot of time in the shop, so it's not like we spent much time together as we did when we first met. I might see her in the morning and then I'll be at home in the daytime, or I'd be going out looking at things, minding my own business during the day, and I'd see her in the evenings. So it wasn't unusual that she wasn't spending time with me because it just wasn't like that when we were there in the village. I suggested we reduce the price to the other 2 to 10,000, and we did that, and another month goes by and no one's taking that either, and this guy is still not paying. I told my wife to kick him out, so my wife goes round to talk and says, "Don't worry, he's going to pay soon, he's just waiting for his business to pick up." And well, he didn't pay ever. And after we put the price down to 8,000 and no one took that, we went as low as 5,000, and that was as low as we were prepared to go. That's when people came in and said, "We'll give you 4." It turns out that the rental of 12,000 in an area like that was completely unrealistic. I just thought it sounded reasonable for the fact that people could run businesses from there. And then that's when that guy moved in, so it did sound to be going off to a great start. We did get people into one of the other ones at 4,500, but the other one just remained empty, and after another month of this guy not paying, my wife said she was going round to have another look to see what was going on. I told her okay, and then she left the house, and I called out, "Hang on, I'll go with you," but she didn't hear. So she sets off in the car and I go on the bike and follow. I actually stopped off to buy a drink, and I probably spent 10 minutes there, and that was when I got back on the bike, expecting her to be talking to this guy, but she wasn't talking to this guy. Something else was going on. And then that's when you realise that everything you thought that was happening in your life, everything you thought was going on, was not true at all. I confronted my wife. I was furious, shouting at the top of my voice, "What are you doing?" And the guy comes out and I don't know what to do. I don't want to get into too much detail as to exactly what happened, but I eventually found out that this was the father of her children, and they'd been in a relationship basically all the time, and he was just prepared to accept what she did because he didn't want to work. He made a bit of money fixing bikes and selling them, But he wasn't paying rent because it belonged to his wife. But she was my wife. I mean, we were married in the village, but we didn't do any of the legal stuff. That was when I found out that she was actually legally married to this guy. The thing that hurt the most was that her family didn't really know what was going on either. The thing that shocked me was when she told me she was married. She said she married this guy in secret. The family just knew about the relationship to start with and that it was going on, and they knew he was the father of her children, but they thought that she wasn't together with him anymore. They didn't even know that they married legally. They didn't know any of this was going on, and they didn't have a normal wedding ceremony in the village. So, all of a sudden, that's what happened. My wife was actually his wife. The whole time I've been living there, and then I'm thinking about all the times she went round to go and visit to see where the money was in rent. All the times that I wasn't with her, was she with him? And yeah, of course, that was it. Big loss on the house. Just taking out that mortgage on my house in England, and I've got a little bit of money in the bank, but the rent I'm getting isn't enough to cover the mortgage, and I don't have enough to cover myself, even close to. So it was a situation where I either sell my house and get the rest of the equity out of it, which would have probably been enough for me to live in Thailand as a single retiree in Pattaya, or go back to England, get another job, and put myself in a position in the future that's going to be better. That's what I did. I left Thailand completely destroyed about that. Even today, I still can't work out how she did that, and how she kept it a secret so well, and how she was so loving around me, and how she was so affectionate and kind and nice. Yet she had that secret, and the way she explained it was she just loved him, and she'd always loved him, but she said she loved me too. He was prepared to accept it. Why aren't you? She said, as if she was going to expect me to give her any kind of answer to such a ridiculous question. So that's what happened. Multiple more years working back in England, but I did get the mortgage paid off. My house is worth considerably more than it was before, so I'm glad I didn't sell it, and I'm in a good position today. But that was just a setback, a huge setback in fact, and I hadn't been back to Thailand since. I have actually retired to Malaysia on the My Second Home program, and it's a great country, but it doesn't have the nightlife of Thailand. I'm paranoid though about the nightlife of Thailand now because it can lead to places that you would never imagine things could lead to. I often do think about what she's doing today. Did she move him into the house that I built? Did the kids move in? I mean, the kids always stayed with her family when I was there. I don't know what happened and I don't really care. I mean, I care because what I was doing, I expected to be able to have around 40% extra income just by doing what we did. It was meant to turn into something good, so that's why I did it. I didn't do it thinking that it was a big risk, but even if she didn't do what she did and we only rented them for $4,500 a month each, which seemed to be more realistic, it wouldn't have been enough to cover the extra mortgage payments anyway, so I don't know what I would have done if that happened. This is not really a Thailand problem. This is a people problem. There are people like that all over the world, so just because this happened in Thailand, I don't think it's a Thailand issue. I mean, perhaps things like this happen in Thailand far more than they would elsewhere, but I wouldn't have walked into a similar establishment in Spain, for example, and do the same thing, would I? And that's the thing I still struggle with. There are places, well, not the same anywhere close really, but similar kind of places in Spain, but you wouldn't even consider entering a place like that. You wouldn't even consider speaking to someone like that, let alone anything else, let alone marriage. But in Thailand, this seemed to be some kind of strange phenomena, I would call it, when guys don't seem to mind about it. Yet in any other country, there's no way they would do it. So don't do it in Thailand as well, and that's all I'd say.